Good morning. We're excited for today's session as well. That'll be carried over to Thursday. If you're able to join in on Thursday again, we'd love it. We know sometimes life interrupts and you won't be able to be here for both days, but that's okay. We're certainly excited just to have you at least here for today with the hope of Thursday as well. With that being said, I know we're going to go very slowly kind of through this whole process intentionally. Matt's going to kind of pause at a number of different places. We're going to have a number of moments where we're going to have some small group work. So you're going to get to know some folks here across the state if you don't already know them, because we're going to try to use the same groups throughout. Now, granted, if a couple of you were here today and then we have to transition over to some different groups because people are absent on Thursday, we'll certainly be flexible. We know how to pivot. That's an easy one, right? Think of the chaos and kind of the struggle sometimes in your daily work. This is an easy pivot. Well, that's an easy one to float through. But with that being said, we'll have some small group work. We also have two really awesome, courageous folks who have volunteered, and I don't know, maybe they don't know what they got themselves into, but two amazing folks. And I say amazing because me and Katrina were not ones who jumped into this. They were eager and they volunteered to kind of do some role playing for the group for us to kind of walk through to kind of see on some of these pieces as well. So that we can kind of analyze as a group of like, hey, what was awesome? Where were some struggles, different things like that, because we're all learning together. So I really appreciate themselves putting themselves out there. With that being said, we are indeed recording. So kind of an awkward session in some sense to record because we're doing so much group work, but we know there's going to be little nuggets of information that maybe folks want to go back and listen to or things like that. So it'll be kind of a choppy 2 days of recording because we're going to have so many moments of group work. But we figured, we've had enough requests. We'll still put it out there if there's things that people do want to go back in and hone in and re-listen to. So we'll post the recording for what it's worth, knowing that it's not quite the same experience. By all means, for you to watch the recording afterwards if you haven't gotten to kind of do some of that group work. So I'm not sure if there's anything else we need to kind of go over to begin with before we pass it over to Matt, Katrina, Rachel, Jason. Anything you think we're missing?
Only thing I would add is if you by chance use somebody else's link, if you could change your name. So if, I think right now we have a couple, as far as I can see, a couple of duplicates. So just change your name. If you hover over your right corner, there's 3 dots, click on that, and then just rename yourself. So that way we can know who's here, especially that's important for when we break up into groups.
The other thing I would add is we are going to be doing small group work. So you're going to want your camera on just for the sake of your group. Because as we indicated, there will be some role playing, and so having your cameras on will be really critical for that too.
Okay, I think those are all the nitty-gritty details. So with that, happy Monday, good morning. We're going to pass you over to Matt. Matt, they're all yours.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Amy. Appreciate it, and good morning. If I haven't met you, my name is Matt Gebhardt. I'm with Casey Family Programs. Really, this is going to be a really fun morning, I think. And the onus is going to be on you because we're going to ask you to put yourself out there a little bit and to practice the Protected Capacity Family Assessment. And today it's going to be really all in on introduction. It's the Shark Week. We made a joke of it when we put it out there, but we really want to take a deeper dive into a couple of the stages of the PCFA to get people some real practice. Yes, I went through this, but it was a group. In fact, maybe you're saved because when we first would do a practicum event, it was with 16 individuals and they were broken into 4 groups and we had cameras that would videotape you like old grad school style, right? And you get to see yourself do this and everyone gets super uncomfortable. It's great. And I had to do it myself in a place called Green Lake, Wisconsin. And I was terrible at it, but I learned a lot. And then we went and got beers afterwards, and my friend nearly drowned me in a lake, but forget that. It was a great time. And today we're doing something that's never been done before. We're going to try to do this practicum event virtually with like 120 people in like, I don't know how the math works out, 40 groups of 3 and to break out some practice. This will only work as well as you all put some effort into it. So we're going to put it that you'll get out of this what you put into it. And the rough plan is that I'm going to talk a little bit just a little bit, promise, this morning about the introduction and get us all back on the same page about what this is, and go over some of the facilitative objectives and answer questions that come up. And then we're going to get to watch someone, right? We're going to get to watch someone do an introduction. And this, by the way, is not meant to be perfect. In fact, none of this is meant to be perfect. I know in my time in North Dakota, y'all are some high achievers. You hold yourselves to really high standards and are afraid not to be perfect at something. This is not about being perfect. It's about just, you know, putting yourself out there, making an effort, making mistakes, you know, stopping, rewind. Can I do that again? Let's try that another way. It's all about some space and time to get some real feedback on how this works. I also have this vague notion that maybe you've tried this. I hope you have, since you've been implemented since the beginning of December, and that maybe this will be a good, maybe second or third time through. So after we get to see an example and get to talk about it, guess what? We'll be breaking into small groups, groups of 3. So there's no hiding in these small groups, right? You're gonna be broken into small groups where everyone will get an opportunity to go through the introduction. And this is going to be with the McGregor case, the case that we've been working through the last couple of times. So we should be familiar with it. And you'll get to see yourself do it, I guess, so to speak. And then you'll see 2 other examples as we all do an introduction on the McGregor case. With that, we'll come back, we'll debrief a little bit as a big group, and then you'll be on your way. So thoughts or questions about the process? By the way, I want to say welcome to my friends from Washington State. I see Teresa's on the call with us. I'd extend an invitation to her to join us as they're looking to pilot the Pcfa there. Teresa, you want to say hi?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock here. I heard it was 10 o'clock there. Thank you so much for welcoming me. I'm the area administrator for the King East Bellevue office here in Washington State, and we're just starting our succession planning. So thank you. I'm really looking forward to just observing today.
Awesome, welcome.
You're muted there, Matt.
Wow,
Didn't get there, yeah.
I got muted. That's crazy. I hope that answer. If there's any other good questions, sure, put them out there. I hope that's what you were expecting today. All right. So in terms of a brief review, if you all recall, the protective capacity family assessment is that assessment that we do to identify what needs to change. And it's completed anytime a case is open where there's impending danger. And the what needs to change is around what's the diminished protective capacity, and having a process where we're developing goals around identifying what needs to change. And that process is meant to engage caregivers in a conversation and really getting their voice, really getting their involvement. It's going to be focused around the reason the case is open, right? And the reason the case is open is there's diminished caregiver protective capacity that's creating dangerous family conditions. So that's the focus of these conversations during the Pcfa. At the end, the goals are going to be individualized, right, to the family, and they'll be behaviorally stated. This isn't going to be about compliance. And finally, this process of the Pcfa is got a specific, trainable, and replicable process. Like it's a roadmap, right? It's like dance steps. Like we can do this statewide. We can do this between units. No matter who's going out on introduction, we all roughly have the same recipe. We have the same process. This is not meant to like stomp out your awesome social work skills and your individuality and the nuances with which you bring to your practice, but it is to create a process that we all agree is best practice. If these are the goals that are required, that's a replication there. There's 4 stages, if you recall. The first one is around preparation, where even before introduction, right, before we ever meet the family, there's things that we need to be prepared for. We need to be prepared to know, like, what the danger was, how it was described to the family. We need to have some working knowledge around what's diminished and what's existing in terms of protective capacity. Oops. We need to be able to answer the questions that families likely have for us. Like, why aren't my kids home? When can my kids come home? Right? Who are you? What are you doing here? What do I have to do? Basic questions that every parent generally has every time we open up a case. As I was fortunate enough to be a part of a group that had developed the Pcfa a couple decades, a few decades ago now. And really we started off with, well, what do families want to know when we first meet them in home or in foster care? And it turns out the questions tend to be the same, right? Who are you? What is this process? I don't understand court. What's the visitation? How are my kids doing? When can my kids come home? Why is this even necessary? Always the same questions. So in my preparation stage, I'm getting ready for those questions. In an introduction, I have a structured way to get at them. So I'm using this. This looks like your Pcfa tool, right? This is how we document the protective capacity family assessment. The protective capacity family assessment is not the tool, right? The assessment are these conversations that we're having. It's the process of assessment that's going on with us as professionals. We document it on this tool. So this is different than, say, a clinical like CANS tool or something where I'm rating a family and kind of looking at them through a microscope. This is about a conversation, an assessment we're having with a family, and the tool is where we put that information. So in this introduction section within the Pcfa, we're simply documenting the conversation you're about to practice today. So when I went out and first met with the family, I introduced myself, I introduced my role, and I had a conversation about what's going to happen next. That conversation goes into this chunk of the Pcfa tool. And these are what I'm going to refer to, you might hear me say, facilitative objectives. These are the things we're trying to achieve in the midst of this conversation that we're having with the family for the first time. This is meant as a reasonable order in which that conversation can likely go. In other words, if I'm going out, I'd have like my notebook and I would have something like these objectives on a page so that when I'm in the midst of this conversation that sometimes can get pretty hairy, right, with families who are pretty upset, I've got a pretty good roadmap of what I'm trying to achieve during this conversation. Which is pretty cool, because if you were like me and you first went out on a case, you had nothing. You just said, I got to watch like Katrina do it a couple of times and said, Matt, you're ready, go introduce yourself. I had no idea what I was doing. So this was really helpful if you're new. And if you're not new, it gave me a really great roadmap of how to think how I did these introductory meetings.
I'm pretty sure that's.
So what's the first facilitative objective? Is around engagement, right? And by this, like, how do we engage people? It's kind of a weird question. I know it sounds mysterious. It's like, hey, Rachel, I'm here to engage you in a conversation. Are you feeling engaged? No, like this is just about being genuine and authentic. Like, how are you doing? This sucks. I'm not doing well. That's bad. Let's talk. Can we talk? How's it gone up to this point? It's frustrating. You guys are all full of shit. Okay, that's fair. It's fair to think that. Let's talk about it. Like, like being authentic, a human being, right? Meeting people with where they're at. Saying, hey, I can't promise we're going to agree about everything. I'm willing to hear what you got to say. You said law enforcement lied at court. Let's talk about that. Let's hear what did they lie about. So there's this engagement piece, right? And this happens at the beginning, but it's also happening throughout, obviously. And it's how we bring our authentic, genuine selves to this conversation and not our sort of bureaucratic role to the conversation, which of course is part of our role, but it's not all of it. So as the conversation goes and as we watch Rachel work through, Rachel and Leah, go work through, sorry, I just had a little. So as we work through it, we're going to talk about like what happened that was engaging? Like what did we see that really functioned towards engagement? And as you watch, I'm hoping you take a note or two, like identify very specific things that were happening. Like when Leah said this, that engaged her. So we'll look at that. The next thing is, and this is really start usually at the beginning of this conversation, our roles, expectations, and explaining the Pcfa process. Now my experience, and I can't wait to hear how this goes for everyone on the call. My experience is this sounds easy. Like, hi, I'm Matt. I'm from the local child welfare office. What's my role with the family? Like, what do I do? And how is it different than the CPS worker? Like, how is what just happened different than what I want to do? Are you ready to explain that? And then to really work on expectations, like what are our expectations for families? And what should they expect from us? Like, so I usually start in with things like, you know, I'm going to be really open and honest. I'm going to do my best to be totally transparent. And that's something you can expect from me. I'm not going to pull punches. But also, right, it's not like we're going to be best friends. Like the things that we talk about, I have to report back to court. That's part of what my role is. But I also really want to be honest. Like if I think there's being progress being made, like I'm going to say it. And if I don't think there is, I'm going to say it, right? And so that's what you can really expect from me. What else do you want to expect from me? So like there's a real conversation about expectations. And then the process itself. Here's what I want to have happen, which is I'm hoping to have happen. I'm hoping you're willing to meet with me again. I'm hoping you're willing to have some conversations around what can change. Even if we don't agree, I'm hoping you're willing to meet and we can talk about what we don't agree about. At the end of these meetings, what I'm hoping to have are some goals. And those goals will be in something called a case plan. And the case plan might have some services in it. You talked about services already, right? That stuff might be in there. But at the end of it, I want it to be your plan. That's my goal with this. Is that something you'd be willing to do? Like you get them involved and be transparent about the process itself. From there, it's really a move into the reason for the agency involvement. And what this means is that we describe in vivid way the nature of the danger. Like there is a reason, like all of that said, there is a reason why the case was open. And I understand that's really been hard for you with CPS. Like you're just telling me how terrible that was. But there is a reason why the case is open. And it's really important that I'm clear about the agency's view about why it's open. And here's where it gets tricky, right? Is being very clear in language that a client would understand about why there's danger, why we decide it's danger. What is it? So the language here would never be there's impending danger. That means nothing to families, right? That's just some jargon. And the answer here would never be there's issues and concerns and we're worried. Well, it could be a little bit about we're worried, but we'd have to say worried about what? So we want to be really vivid about what the danger is. And this sometimes can be challenging, especially if we're not sure. Finally, we get their feedback on that, right? Like, what's your view? I've put it out there. This is why there's danger. What's your take? You think that's BS. You think that's totally wrong. We've got it totally wrong. And that's fine if we disagree. I just want to understand what's your understanding. Finally, we seek commitment to continue to participate. We say, hey, are you willing? I wonder if you're willing to continue to meet with me. Because, you know, you don't have to. And they'll be like, yeah, I have to. Well, I mean, you do in so much as the court's requiring you, right? But ultimately, I can't make you do anything. The agency can't make you make changes. And this is that self-determination piece, right? Helping the family preserve self-determination, say this is all going to be about choices and things that you want different for your family moving forward. And I know that real change can't be mandated by a judge. And I'm hoping to have some conversations about what real change could be to make your life better, the life of your kids better. Is that something you'd be willing to do? E is finally around safety management status. That in the context of this conversation, like if there's an in-home safety plan, this is an in-home case, I'm checking in with the family about the in-home safety plan. So I'm like, you know, grandma's coming over every weekend. How's that going? Well, it kind of sucks. I don't like her in my business, but it's okay. I mean, is it helpful at all? Well, yeah, sometimes she cooks. It's fine. You know, it's good to have some company. You're just checking in, like, are they still, remember those safety management questions? Are they still willing to allow the plan to be in place? Does it still seem like it's adequate to manage danger? So I'm breezing through this really fast, but these are the goals. This is what I'm trying to achieve during that conversation. Sometimes I'm going very linearly, like today, since we're all practicing it, it'll likely go in sort of a linear fashion like this, but sometimes it doesn't, right? You can get off track. A family could get really like stuck on something, right? Maybe they're really stuck on the reason for the cases involved. And I have to really spend a lot of time talking about danger and safety and why we believe there's danger. Sometimes they agree. So it depends a lot on how this goes with each family. So pausing for a second. Those are facilitative objectives. Thoughts or questions about any of those? Any experiences so far with them as you attempted to do an introduction this year? Okay, so first exercise, and I know we got to figure out cameras and mics and that kind of stuff. That's fine. The first part of the exercise is we're going to break into brief group and spend like maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes reviewing the introductory objectives in your group. And here's a question for you. Which of these are most difficult? Which are going to be a little easier? Right? How are you doing with them now? And just work through as a small group around getting ready to practice these. Once we're done with that, we're going to come back and get ready for our fishbowl where we're going to watch an introduction example.
I think there might be a question out in the field, Matt. Michelle,
Oh, okay.
You said that you had a question before we go into group. Can you unmute Michelle and ask your question?
Oh, looks like she's unmuted, but we're not hearing you, Michelle. One of those beautiful Zoom conversations, right? We're like, oh, we can't hear you. And you've unmuted. So we can't hear you. But it says you aren't muted.
Such as Zoom.
I know, right? It's beautiful and frustrating all at the same time, always. Oh no, we still can't hear you.
You know, Michelle she's probably typing it in, which is cool.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there.
Yeah.
Great.
There we go.
Sorry. I was just saying I don't type as fast as I speak. So on the Pcfa, like the discovery summary A through E. So I've been accused of like adding way too much information in the beginning, and then sometimes I'm told that I don't add enough information in here. Like I'm confused. Like like, and then sometimes this is my discovery stage, but then a couple weeks down the road, am I supposed to be adding all that stuff in that I'm gathering?
Sure. Well, let's on the 7th, we're going to deep dive into the discovery stage and talk more about sort of what gets documented in each of these sections, Michelle. And so today, let's just kind of, if you're okay with this, like focusing in on the introduction, but I think those questions are really reasonable. And I know when we reviewed some PCFAs, we saw that in some areas, this assessment kind of blew up. And as opposed to being about this conversation that we're having with the client now, it became like the lifetime of the family and included. Whoops. And so we've seen the assessments kind of blow up to be everything under the sun and get really unwieldy. And it's really not meant to be that way. Really, it's about me. In this case, we have one parent, right? It's me with this parent, and I'm introducing them. It's like sometimes the introduction helps me think it's like an orientation. Like if you ever went to college, there's an orientation day where you'd see those like freshmen are getting toured around with parents, and it's really awkward. They're walking around, here's the gym, here's the cafeteria, here's the union. It's like that. This is an orientation meeting with a family. The things that families tell us about what really was bad about their involvement with foster care and in-home is that they didn't understand what's going on. And it was never really clear what our role was. Okay, well, let's fix that by doing this really well. They also said they didn't really understand why CPS had to be involved. Okay, let's carve that out. Let's be absolutely concretely clear around why we need to be involved. And that's that statement around danger. So we're really just reverse engineering this introduction to get at all of those things that clients have said we don't do really well. And so this is a rare opportunity today as we get to really spend a lot of time thinking sort of like a micro skill. How do we really nail an introduction so families actually feel like they understand what's going on? So we really intentionally work to develop our relationship with the family. Like we really seek commitment to continue this conversation in the future, right? So it's really engineered to do these things that we all want to have happen. And then we document that fantastic conversation into the introduction. Now, sometimes they won't be a fantastic conversation. They'll say, screw this, I ain't talking to anybody about anything. That's fine too. We'll document our efforts to engage them. So it's really an opportunity to engage parents, not a guarantee. So that's a quick 5 minutes into your breakout groups. Review the introductory facilitative objectives together. Maybe share stories about what's worked, what's been confusing. Just the introduction though. That's all we're looking at this morning. Welcome back. As folks are filing back in, are there questions or thoughts that came up or reflections? Anything popped up that we should address around the introductory stage?
Man, our group was awesome. I mean, I think there's just been some different varying levels of actually applying this to day to day. I'm a real poor example to have because I don't do the day-to-day PCFAs in the field. However, the perspective I have is from our fidelity reviews and all of the foundation of training and such. And so I think one of the questions I challenged our group on was just to ask about those warm handoffs and that clarity right out the gate to the families regarding the workers and who's who and if they have a clear understanding, because we still, unfortunately in North Dakota have those overlapped cases where they're working with CPS and a case manager for either in-home or foster at the same time. Ideally, we know that wouldn't be the case if we're a little further in the implementation stages of safety framework. But just to bring that up, because there's that little bit of the silo switch, which is happening, and we knew that from fidelity reviews, but just something maybe to address in that helping the families with understanding clarity and roles. I think the gals that I had in my subcommittee are doing a nice job of being able to articulate that. but just for families to have that knowledge and understanding of how we are and where we're going in North Dakota.
Yeah. Well, and Kelsey, thanks for pointing that out. And, you know, no matter how you all split up the roles, if you have an extra social worker involved, it's even more important to clarify what the roles and expectations are, because this could really get confusing, right? And having everyone on the same page about our reason for involvement would hold, whether we do this in a family team meeting, whether I'm doing it 1v1 at a kitchen table. So these are like facilitative objectives. How we get to them could be different, but we know we want to get to them. And sometimes when we talk about, when we first started training many years ago, training this, we thought the introduction was going to be like a no-brainer, because a lot of these things are things you do already, right? You meet with families for the first time already. When you meet with them, you talk with them. So there's stuff that you're saying. So we thought, well, a lot of this is going to be stuff that agencies are doing already. So when I'm lecturing on it, I kind of feel like, man, I'm sort of like, this is like simple stuff. But then you watch people do it, right? And you know your practice, but you rarely see your colleagues practice, right? But if you were in my shoes and got to see lots of people introducing themselves as like foster care workers, you would realize how much variance it is and how often their roles are described in totally different ways. You know, whether it's Jessica or whether it's Rebecca introducing themselves, it would almost be like you're from different agencies. That's how different the roles and expectations could be introduced sometimes. So this really gives us an opportunity to be consistent with it. Any other thoughts or questions that came up that we should chat about before we get into first? What's coming up next is an observation and feedback fishbowl, and then we'll get to try it on ourselves. Questions or thoughts about introduction?
This is Kelly Mitchell. I guess I just had one thing that I've noticed for myself as a worker, with other workers, and then just in these trainings about how do we describe the impending danger without using the word impending danger. So just a little brief synopsis of how we could describe that would be helpful to me. Yeah,
that is a trick. And it sounds easy. Like you said, Kelly, it sounds easier than it is. And part of it, you know, I've thought a lot about this, and this is part of the preparation. Remember, the preparation, it's being clear why the agency is involved, so that when I get to the introduction, I'm ready to say this. So it's not like surprising me. I know they're going to ask, right? I know I'm going to have to say, this is why you're involved. So I can, with my supervisor, I'll be like, hey, Rachel, I'm not sure how to describe this. Help me just think about how to tell a parent, this is why there's danger. And I want to use impending danger, but I know it's not right. So use your supervisor in this process as well. Anyway, that said, I try to think of it in terms of like, if this was a good friend of yours, right? Not a client. And this was what was going on in their life, and you're worried for them and you're worried for their kids. How would you describe it to them? Would you say, I'm worried there's impending danger while you're sitting there at Applebee's having riblets and a beer? No, that's stupid, right? You'd say, I'm worried about what's happening with you. And I'm worried how that's impacting what's going on with Jenny. Jenny's a wonderful, wonderful child. You know, you just told me how great she is, but I'm worried that what's going on in terms of using meth, and I'm worried about who's being let into your life and who has access to Jenny, creates a situation that's really dangerous. It's really unsafe, for not just for her, but for you too. What do you think about that? Right. So that's just a random example. So you're just trying to think of it in terms of just human beings and not so much the clinical technical piece. So cool. So what's coming up next is we're going to see a role play. And Leah Honeyman is going to be our social worker. Hey, Leah.
Hey, guys.
And Rachel is going to be our parent. And I'm kind of a supervisor here with Leah, and I'm going to say, Leah, we're about to watch an introduction. What's going on with mom in this case? Because this is going to be different than McGregor, right? This is going to be a little different scenario, so you can see a different case. But what's going on with mom and what's happening in this introduction?
So the case that we have is there is a single mom Dad is not involved. We don't know where Dad's really at. He's been gone for the last year. We have 2 children, an 8-year-old girl named Sally and a 3-year-old boy named Sam. The reason that we got involved was because the kids were being left in the evenings by themselves while Mom went out with her friends or her new boyfriend. And this had been going on for a few months. The incident that led to our involvement was that Sam, the little boy, got sick and he was really sick. He was inconsolable, and Sally didn't know what to do and she didn't know how to help him. So she went to the neighbors. She told the neighbors what was happening, and they realized the kids were by themselves. And there was a law enforcement and child protection were called, and there was a present danger plan put in place that the kids were going to go stay with Mom, who is Rachel in this case, Mom's parents about an hour away, and that's where they still are. They're still staying with the grandparents.
Awesome. And so any like significant cognitive delays or anything that we expect that might make it hard to do an introduction?
Nope, no, there's no cognitive delays that we know of. Katrina was the social worker that did the CPS assessment. She said the only thing Mom is very, doesn't think that it's a big deal that the kids were being left in the evenings at all. She doesn't really have awareness about that. There also was concern from collaterals that during the day she was sleeping a lot, and there might be something going on with her that she wasn't really meeting their needs during the day when she was there.
Okay.
So they're just kind of being left by themselves.
Excellent. So I asked Amy if we could pin you and Rachel, and for the rest of everyone, right? I want to sort of cue in to our facilitative objectives that we just reviewed and sort of follow along. And when we get to the end, we want to get feedback about those things that you found were really engaging, that you thought went really well, areas of improvement. And again, this is not about getting it perfect. Gosh, if you guys could see my first Pcfa, it would be so embarrassing. You guys would tear me apart. So we're going to have lots of grace, and this is a place where we all just practice. And it's a safe place to practice and mess up if you do.
And just so you know, we're volunteering today, and next time it'll be somebody else. That's what we decided, right, Leah?
Yep, we volunteered. We're the ones to start it off.
Awesome. So with that, if there aren't any questions, you two take it away. And here's my motto for the day. We have lots of time. Take your time through these stages. Don't rush. And I'll let you guys go to it.
Are we supposed to be, I'm going to change my screen here, you guys, so I don't see everybody. Okay. Hi, Rachel, thanks for letting me come to your home and meet with me today. As we talked about on the phone, my name is Leah Honeyman, and I will be your ongoing caseworker for your case. And here's my contact information. I know you worked with Katrina before as a CPS worker, but from now on, I'll be your point of contact. So thanks for meeting with me.
Yeah.
Good. How are you feeling? I know it kind of could be nervous having a social worker come to your home, and I know you've had a lot of things that have happened in the last 3 weeks, and your kids aren't with you right now, and I know that probably is hard. Can you tell me a little bit about how things have been going for you in the last few weeks?
Well, they've been crappy. I want to know what I need to do to get my kids home.
Yep.
I haven't been told yet. I want to get started on things. If you just tell me what I need to do, I'd really just like to get started with that. So hopefully that's something you can help me with.
Yeah, we will talk about that today. Some things that we can start getting going with you, and things that might be a little bit different. I want to start from kind of just talk about the last 3 weeks when you've been working with Katrina and your kids haven't been in your home. I know it seems like I'm glad you're motivated. I'm glad you're excited to change, but I just want to take some time and talk about that a little bit. Can you talk about what kind of contact you're having with your kids right now? How often are you seeing them?
I'm not seeing them enough. I want to be able to see them more. It hasn't been enough.
And hopefully we can kind of have that change, and we can talk about what we can do to make them so you can see them more. Are you talking to them on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. And how are things going with them?
Well, they want to come home.
Yeah, I bet they do want to come home. And hopefully when you and I are working together, that's something that we can work towards. So my role is a little bit different than Katrina's. Her role as the CPS worker was that she was going to identify if there was, if your children were safe in your home or unsafe. Through that process, as you know, it was determined that they were unsafe and they couldn't stay with you. And they were placed with your parents. And what I understand, that's about an hour away, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little ways away, but thankfully they are with family, so that's good. I know it's not what you want.
I just can't understand why they had to go or why they can't be home. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Okay.
And that Katrina lady, she didn't explain any of that to me.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully with our conversations, we can have you can have a better understanding of what needs to be different and how they can come home. Like I said, Katrina's role is a little different than mine. Mine is to kind of get to know you better. So we're going to take some time and have some conversations. We're going to probably meet frequently in the next couple of weeks to kind of understand some things that might need to change for your kids to come home. I kind of want to just prepare you. Some of the conversations we're going to have are going to be easy. You might really actually enjoy them. There might be parts of it that you really like talking about. There's some strengths we're going to talk about, some things that you feel like you do well. But part of our conversations might be difficult and they might be hard. And I just kind of want to prepare you for that. As you know, it's a serious thing to not have your kids in your care and to be placed with somebody else. And so we want to make sure we take our time and we figure out what we can do and how we can help you to make some changes so that your kids can come home and they can come home safely and remain there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I just hope we can get this done soon because we I want them home.
That's good. I'm glad you're motivated that you want them home. I think I've talked to Katrina and when she had talked to the kids before, like you said, they're excited to come home too, and they want to come home. Through this process, like I said, I'm hoping that we can meet frequently in the next couple of weeks. In order for it to be really successful and for us to get to the point where your kids can come home, we just need your participation, but really it's up to you. You can decide to have those hard conversations with me. You can decide that you don't want to, but ultimately, the more involved you are, the more open you are, the more you talk about the things that are really hard, the more we can have a better understanding and make a case plan or some goals that can really help your kids come home and get us out of your life so we're not involved anymore.
That would be good.
I think that we can agree on that right away, that'd be good if we weren't involved together. So just to start off about why we were involved. So my understanding, I spoke with Katrina and I spoke with some other individuals that were working with your case before, is that your kids were being left home in the evenings by themselves. And this has been going on for a few months. And that and it's happening about 3 or 4 times a week. They're left home all alone and Sally's being left in charge of Sam. Does that sound accurate? Does that sound right?
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure what the problem is. She's been doing fine. This hasn't been a problem until that one night. So
okay. Can you talk about that one night a little bit about what happened?
I don't even know for sure. You know, Sam got sick and she wasn't sure how to take care of it. So she went to the neighbors and instead of getting a hold of me, she should have got a hold of me. She went to the neighbors and the police were called and then things just all fell to crap.
Okay. So she didn't get a hold of you and that's kind of where you feel like she should have. She should have been able to get a hold of you and reach you. Did she have a number to reach you? Where were you at that time?
I was out.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think the concern that we have or the worry we have is that something really significant could have happened to Sam. You know, he's 3 years old.
It didn't happen. He was fine.
Yeah, and I think we were really lucky that something more significant didn't happen to him. And that's part of a reason for our involvement is we want to make sure it doesn't get to that point again where something could have happened to him that would have been really dangerous and really severe. from my understanding, he had to go to the clinic the next day. He was really sick. He had a really high fever. And Sally, you know, she's 8. She doesn't really know what she's supposed to do in those situations. And I think Sally has told Katrina and her grandparents that she didn't know what to do, and she felt overwhelmed and didn't have any idea.
Okay, so it happened one time. Like, why do they have to be in foster care? Because of one time?
Well, and I think that's our hope, is that we can figure out some understanding that where you're at with your kids, knowing what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, that we can make some plans that they could come home and that doesn't have to happen like that again. But for right now, we're going to have them stay where they're at. Do you feel like they're okay where they're at with your parents?
Well, they're fine there, but they're better off being home with me.
Okay. What I heard from you earlier is that you do want to have some more visitation and you do want some more contact.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get that kind of figured out. We can have some conversations about that. What I was wondering about is, when we're going to do this process, when we're coming through and we're going to meet for the next couple of weeks, how committed do you feel? Do you feel like that this is something that you're able to do, that you want to do? Where are you at with things?
I really don't have a choice. I have to do what you guys tell me so I can get my kids back.
Well, you always have a choice. So I'm hoping that through working with me that you'll understand that you always have a choice of what you want to do. And I'll be honest with you about what sometimes those choices might look like, how it might benefit your case, how it might not work with your case, so we can have some understanding about that. Okay. So for right now, your kids are with your grandparents or with your parents, and they're going to stay there for the time being. And then I'm hoping that we can have some more conversations today about some things that we know that you do well as a parent, some things that you do well in your life that you're proud of, that you're happy about, and that also we can have some conversations about things that might need to be different, about the way that things are going in your life. But also some things that might need to be different about how you're parenting your kids. Sound good? Okay. I could go into the discovery stage, but I'm not going to.
Nice. First off, Rachel, I want to ask you, if you're the parent, how did this feel?
Well, so I didn't want to be like totally obstinate either, because that wouldn't be helpful, but it's a little bit harder to argue sometimes, I think, in this approach as a parent, because she's giving me some options. She's trying to engage with me. It's not like she's just saying, here's what you need to do type of thing. So I would, it seems like it'd be a little bit harder to be angry with her or argue with her with the approach.
It is a disarming approach by design, and it does make it hard to be obstinate. And then your groups, feel free to be kind of obstinate, but go with what makes sense for your practitioner. Leah, and first I'm going to ask Rachel your take, and then Leah yours, and then let's open it up to everyone about the things that you really like. And there was a lot to like. So Leah, what do you think went well, and were there areas where you found yourself sort of in a cul-de-sac?
I think that the hard part is also probably what Kelly had talked about before, is like, how do we explain danger where you're not using our terminology? I think that's part is hard. And also for me in particular, to slow things down is really hard. I have this sense that I just want to jump right into it. So I had to be very aware of that. And Rachel and I knew that before too, that was something. The only thing that I think that now that I'm looking back that I wish I would have went back into is more of her perception about how things went with the CPS assessment a little bit more.
Yeah, that would have been a place to expand and really get like, how was that tough? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And that probably would have been even more engaging. So, by the way, I thought it went really well. I thought you did a really nice job. Really
you see my lead in, Leah, for the self-determination?
You did. Thanks, Rachel. That's a good client.
Now I want to open up to the rest of the group. You can come off of mute, or you could go ahead and put questions or thoughts in the chat. What did you like about how this went? Did you have any ahas or anything that happened that really, like, wow, that was good?
I definitely like that Leah did the you have a choice, you always have a choice, because I think that's a very common thing for parents to say is, well, I don't have a choice, I have to do this. And so I really appreciate that. And when I think too about like using motivational interviewing skills and stuff, I've occasionally seen it in tools like this is non-negotiable. Well, it is negotiable actually. So I thought that was awesome that Leah did that.
I loved how she ended it. I loved, okay, well, the kids are going to stay with your parents and we're going to continue to have conversations, talk about things that go well in your life and things that you do well. And then things that I love how you said things that might need to be different, not changes you need to make, but things that may need to be different in your life and your parenting skills. I thought, wow, that's a great way to end that conversation in a way that doesn't make the client feel like they've done something wrong.
Yeah, that was awesome. I agree.
I also like the way she redirected the conversation from, this just happened only once. Why did CPS have to come into the family? This happened only once. She redirected it into, well, this is where we're at right now, and I'm going to work with you going forward. So it was nice to not get into, because it's very easy to get into an argument over what is or what is not. But she did very well in redirecting the conversation, what the next steps are. Thank you.
Beautiful comment. Thank you so much for that. That's right. I agree.
I also like how she took the, it's often that we hear, well, I just want them back. I want them back right now. I want them back. I want them back. I want them back right now. And you hear it so much, it gets kind of like, oh, I know, but if you would just make the behavioral change and make it safe, we could. But I appreciated how she handled it when she said, how it sounds like you're really motivated. So instead of, sometimes I think I'll just kind of gloss over it because it's like, yeah, I know you want them back, but, and then she had just really took the time to say, it sounds like you're really motivated. And that was something that stuck out to me.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Other thoughts? Anything that you might do differently?
Well, it was real clear, and I don't know that I would do this differently, but I would have been tempted to, when she was talking about, I don't understand why, why they have to be at my parents, and, like right from the get-go, I would have been tempted to jump in and talk about the impending dangers at that point and go there with her, because that's where she was at. But I think the way Leah did it was probably better to sort of put that off and to really follow the process. First, talk about the roles, first talk about the process, what's going to happen, and kind of get through that and kind of work on a little bit more engagement before getting into that difficult conversation about the impending dangers. So I kind of like how she did that by putting it off a little bit, even though it probably didn't feel very good to Rachel to have to, because she wanted answers now kind of thing. But I think that was, I think that was a good way to do that.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That was something I noted as well. And it's a classic trap. Okay, so you meet with the family, you introduce yourself, and they say something like Rachel said, what do I need to do? Let's just get this going. I don't want to talk with you. Just give me the services. And you really want to do what Leah did, which is to put that conversation off, because what they're asking for is an easy way out. It's resignation to services. Just give me the services and let's get started. And then I don't have to talk about tough things, right? And if you go for that, because if at first you think, oh, this is great, they want services, I'll set them up and I'm out of here, off to lunch. But in fact, you've just helped them avoid having the conversations you want to have. And so usually when they're saying that stuff, like when's the services and that, it's a dodge. And so you put it off and say, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk lots about services, about anything you think you might be helpful. But before we get there, we need to talk through sort of what my role is here and what it's not. Most of the times, 95 times out of 100, that will work. And occasionally families that won't work with, and you kind of have to delve into danger and services a little bit early, and then come back to the roles and expectations a little later. The one pitfall, Leah, and I think this is like the classic one, is when you describe the danger. If you describe the danger as the incident, then they're going to get stuck there a little bit. And so, like, for instance, if I told Rachel, like, you know, when she says, well, if I said, like, hey, Rachel, there's a reason we're involved. Remember last Saturday when the kids were left home alone? And then, you know how Rachel's going to respond? She responds exactly how she did, which is, that was a one-time event. Why are you guys making such a big deal of it? And now I've got to figure out how to backpedal out of it, because I just described why we're involved based on the incident. And so we don't want to do that. That's what they already think this is about. One time I mess up, the cops come out, now CPS is involved. This is BS. And so the reason involvement, we know, is because of diminished protective capacity and because there's impending danger. So in this instance, if it's a lack of knowledge, skill, and motivation on behalf of this caregiver around the needs of the child, well, what's diminished? Let's say mom doesn't recognize threats. Maybe that's our initial impression. She doesn't recognize that this is dangerous, right? Then my description of the danger isn't Saturday night the kids were left home alone. It's like sometimes there's like threatening situations that you might not see or understand. And those threatening situations have to do with sometimes the supervision or the day-to-day care. And it's not like every moment of the day, but significantly enough so that sometimes she's unsafe. And by unsafe, I mean like really bad things could happen. And then when Rachel says, I don't get that, then I say, remember Saturday? Remember on Saturday, they were left home alone. So the Saturday becomes evidence for this condition about recognizing threatening people and situations. So that would have helped you not like sort of step into as a little bit of a trap, kind of getting caught in the incident as describing why we were involved. But overall, I thought it was great. And I agree with Rachel, like it would have been really hard to not engage in that conversation. I thought you did a great job of really working through the self-determination piece, like explaining your role. I thought it was a really solid job. There are some places where in the family, when mom gives you like again, I was talking about them as gifts, like he gives a gift, like, I really want them home. And you can say, that's great. Well, here's what we're going to do. Or you could stop and open that gift a little bit and say, you really miss them. And they'll say, yeah, I really do. What do you miss the most? What's the hardest part so far? Right? And spend some time like in the empathy, like that's a hard conversation, right? And spend some time empathizing and engaging them around that. But if you have to stop and want to do it, it can be hard because we've got our agenda, right? We want to get to the stuff we want to get through. And that can feel like a diversion, but it's not. Other thoughts and reflections?
I know that we did that in 10 minutes or maybe it was less than that. I don't even know what the time was. I feel like that now doing that, it would be way longer, or like you would want it to be way longer before getting into the discovery phase. Like I feel like you would want to spend a lot of time there getting to know the mom or like building that relationship.
Yeah, and in our role plays, we're not going to have like lots and lots of time, but
yeah,
take some time to do some of it. So the engagement part isn't like, so what was your experience in CPS? Well, it sucked. Okay, well, let me tell you what's about to happen next. Like, you know, that's what we tend to do. Well, that was in the past. That's CPS. I'm new. I'm the new sheriff in town, and that's all behind us. No, take some time to debrief. Wow, that sounds terrible. That sounds like really awful. It was in the middle of the night. Kids are crying. Oh my gosh. No one wants to go through that. How are you doing? Like, just express care and empathy.
I hit struggles sometimes when we're in that part where we're like talking about like why are we involved, especially if it's like maybe the first time I've met mom, it feels kind of presumptuous where like she hasn't told me, you know what I mean, where I'm like, well, we're involved because you aren't able to identify, like, I don't know, or you don't have the knowledge to parent, or, you know, you are a chronic alcoholic and she hasn't shared any of that information with me. Is there an easier way to make that like feel a little bit better, or maybe a little bit more organic, where like she's telling you that personally? Or like I've had moms say sometimes, well, I've already told the in-home worker that, like, I'm foster care. So she's like, why don't you go talk to the in-home worker? I don't want to talk to you. And so then it even feels worse, where it's like, well, I don't want to be like presumptuous. I want you to tell me in your own words. I don't know. It just feels kind of weird.
Right, and that's a good point, Cheryl, and it points back to how important preparation is. So that if I'm getting this, I've talked with the CPS worker, and I'm asking CPS, why are we involved? And they should have identified impending danger, and they should be able to describe to me the agency's view on what the danger is. And so if it's Katrina says, here's the impending danger. This is what it looks like. This is how it manifests. I say, okay. And my hope is that was explained to the parent. It should have been explained to the parent up front. Now everything's chaotic and they might not know. So now I'm meeting with them. I'm not saying like, here's an opinion that I'm just cooking up right now that's presumptuous. I'm saying like, I owe it to you as we start to work together to say what the viewpoint of the agency is. And the viewpoint of the agency is there's danger. And the danger has to do with recognizing threatening people and situations and understanding the needs of your child. And I'm hoping this isn't the first time you heard that. You know, this is the position of the agency. Just so you know now what the agency is worried about. So, right, I mean, she might say, well, that's all bullshit and none of that is true. That's fine. Then we say, well, we'll just start with that. And that's, I mean, I get that you don't agree with it. And we're going to talk about it. So it's never like this, it never leaves the parent in a situation where they're wondering why these people want to be in my life. I don't get what this is about. Or the only reason they're involved is that one night last week. If that hadn't happened, there would have been no problems. We don't want that to be the case. So, any last words before we think about transitioning into our breakout rooms where everyone gets a chance to do an introductory meeting as a social worker? How exciting is this?
Matt, do you think it's realistic sometimes to think that you're not going to get to the introductory? Like you go out to the home and you have your plan and you're going to sit down and then you walk into a whole different situation. And I think it's, I mean, you can try to redirect it back, but I sometimes I feel like if you go out, you just have to meet the client where they're at. You might not accomplish what you need to accomplish. And I'm thinking of a particular family. It was like constant crisis every time I felt like I was in the house.
That does. And so sometimes they won't meet with you at all. There's no conversation at all. That happens sometimes. I mean, sometimes you get to describe the danger and they say, that's bullshit and get out of my house. That's it. I'm not done talking with you guys. And then I say, okay, but here's what you just need to know. It happens by throwing me out. You need to know these important things as I'm leaving. And so, yeah, it's, you know, the world's crazy and everything's different. For the most part, you're able to get through these because it doesn't depend on them agreeing. None of this depends on them agreeing on anything. They can disagree about every single element and you could do a great introduction because you've been forthright about your role. You've been open about the reason we're involved and you've been clear about what happens next. And they say, screw all of that, get out of my house. You had a great introduction. You did everything that you needed to do. It didn't succeed in engaging them, but that was outside of your control. It was every opportunity to engage them, but they didn't. I mean, that's the thing about self-determination, right? At the end of the day, they could decide to engage or not. Cool. So if you remember McGregor, we're going to use that as we're going to introduce ourselves to, is it Danielle? Was that mom's name in McGregor? We're going to do our introduction with Danielle. If you remember, there's Georgie. Georgie is a kiddo who's got some pretty significant needs around autism. Mom didn't believe in autism, didn't really understand Georgie's needs, and we identified impending danger. And you have been assigned and are going to do an introductory meeting.
Okay, everyone should be back for you, Matt.
Okay, well, welcome back. I know this is kind of challenging with the virtual version of getting into groups. If we were in person, it would have been great to kind of float around and see how these were going and be able to answer questions on the fly. That's always the best part of this. All of that being said, and given the kind of crazy times we're in, I'm really curious to hear how it went. Did it seem natural? Was it difficult? If it was difficult, what was difficult? Or really any feedback at all that folks had experiencing the introduction conversation?
So I haven't had a lot of experience doing it because a lot of my families I've had for a while, and then the one new case that I have, mom is not necessarily meeting with me, but I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was, and I just did what I normally do, and the feedback was that it was good.
Amy, how did you describe the impending danger?
Okay, so funny story, we really just role played and made it up as we went. And I offered the person to tell me why the kid was coming from wraparound to foster care, and he just kept beating around the bush. So I still don't know because we made it up and he didn't tell me.
Well, that might be part of why it was easy. So, you know, that's often the most difficult part, is us communicating to them what the department has identified as the impending danger in a way that's understandable. That can be sometimes the trickiest part.
So I don't know if this is correct. Oh, did I cut you off, Amy?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. And so, I mean, I'm a field service specialist. I don't actually get to go out and do these things, but it's helpful for me to see it from that perspective as being a case manager. So for the impending danger part, I didn't even go with saying impending danger because I didn't want to use that technical term. And I kind of asked the mom, you know, what happened, what could have happened? What could have happened if Georgie was found out on a highway? And then I asked so that they could kind of think about the danger behind it. And then I asked her too, well, how did that make you feel when you realized that he was, you know, in an unsafe situation? So I don't know if that's necessarily correct, because like I said, I don't get to do this all the time, but that's kind of how I went with trying to explain the impending danger, to see what their thought was first on what the safety issue was. And then we kind of went from there.
You know, I think that's a great way to start that conversation. So it's not like wrong or right. So what's most helpful? So remember, the part of the purpose of this part of the introduction is the agency says flat out, this is why we're involved, right? Since we've identified danger, this isn't what do you think we're involved for? I mean, that's part of it, right? What do you think? But we need to go on the record as we've communicated to the family the reason the agency has decided to open the case involuntarily. We know, right? The agency should know. This is the basis. This is why. And this is where we describe why. Because we know that families come out of the other end of the system often saying, I never understood why they opened a case ever. And if you go and look at the documentation, it doesn't look like we did a good job of explaining it. So this is why we're being really intentional that, and I think you made a really good point. Yes, we want to get their perspective. What's their understanding? That's great. But we also must go on the record with describing, it's like respect for people, right? We're having respect enough that we can say flat out, this is why the agency's opened the case. What do you think of that? I think it's crap. Okay, but at least we put it out there and there could be no second guessing that we've explained clearly why we think it should be open. That's why it's so challenging. Yeah, go ahead.
I was Amy's partner and she kind of made it where then I was just with our conversation that I was the one that then talked about the impending dangers in the roundabout way. So I know, I thought it was easy. I thought it was good. I thought it was comfortable talking.
Awesome. Awesome. Other thoughts and experiences?
I didn't do well with that at all.
No worries.
So yeah, in the parts, I would say I appreciate you just honing in right on that, because that is the most difficult part. It really is. I think I came up with some corny roundabout way of saying like you not taking care of you has rippled on to taking care of Georgie or something, but that's not even clear. So what does you taking care of you mean?
It is the most challenging part. And the two traps are, on the one hand, describing the incident. The reason we're involved is last Thursday night, the kids were left unsupervised. And now you defined all the rest of our involvement based on an incident. And we saw kind of what happened with Rachel. Then she's stuck on it and we can't go beyond it. The other side of the equation where we go wrong is we're vague. We say, we have concerns about your appropriateness and substance use. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. It's just jargon and it's too vague and it's too loose and it's not clear. It's like saying nothing. So you're right. It is the most challenging part, to say in vivid, clear ways about what the danger is that will make sense to the family, even if they don't agree with it. And, you know, in this case, when Leah kind of had that challenge, I said, well, in my own mind, I said, well, what's the diminished protective capacity? In that case, I saw recognized threats. And so described it in terms of that diminished protective capacity. That's one way to go. Did anyone have a description of danger for Danielle and Georgie? Like, how would you describe it? How did you just describe it?
Well, I think in our group, I had Annette and Angie, who are both new to our workforce. And so they did a great job. I mean, for two, and I was very, I played the parent and the one, and I think I was too nice of a guy. I could have been a lot harder, but we talked about, I think they both talked about, they did kind of get into a little bit where it was that incident based, but kind of went beyond and let mom talk about, you know, I'm just tired. I'm the mom, I'm the dad, I'm working, I'm trying to, and blah, blah, you know, and then just kind of went, you know, kind of went into kind of some of that, okay, so, you know, kind of that reflection on, okay, so you're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling, you know, we're, as your case manager, I'm here to help you address some of those, and kind of went beyond, not just that she slept one, you know, she overslept one time and Georgie left the house, or, you know, they really let both of them kind of let that conversation flow into mom being able to talk about how she feels or how things are going for her at this point. So I thought that was a really good point for both of them to make, and just to and to kind of you know, differentiate. They both did kind of that role, you know, this is what the child protection process was, and now here I am as your case manager, and kind of talk a little bit about that in the context of that too. We did talk about, in our group, we talked about the fact that, you know, this isn't, you're not going to knock this all out in one, you know, sometimes it's going to be the multiple, and you're not going to get to what you hope to, and that mom or the parent, you know, whoever parent caregiver might lead the conversation in a direction that you weren't anticipating, but you just kind of have to roll with it.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Lisa. That's good. I'm glad it went pretty well. You know, it's kind of a pay me now or pay me later. And we're making these intentional efforts to do these things in the introduction. If you don't achieve them, they don't go away, right? Like if I don't clarify my expectations with the parents, does that issue go away? No, it creates confusion later, as they don't understand why I told the court something that they thought was a secret with us or whatever, or they're surprised we're not best friends, right? Well, so you end up dealing with that later. If I don't describe the impending danger really well, it'll come up later because they think, well, I went to this class, my kid should come home. Well, I didn't do a good job describing the danger, so of course they think that. So we're doing all this introduction as a way to shortcut all those things that are going to bubble up later if I don't do this stuff well up front, right? So that's why it's really important. And sometimes we can't describe the danger because we don't know it. And if you don't know it, you can't describe it. So it's important to really know. Like for me, for Danielle, right? She's got struggles meeting her own emotional needs, and she doesn't understand the complex needs of her child. You put those things together and it's dangerous. And so I have to describe that to mom, right? On the one hand, you're not doing real well. And by really well, I mean, in terms of meeting your own needs, you're talking about how low you've been feeling, how sad you've been feeling. Now, on the other hand, Georgie's got some needs that are unique about how much care it takes to make sure Georgie's safe. Because those things are going together, Georgie's not safe all the time. That's why we're involved. What do you think of that? And I'm not equivocating. Like, that might be why we're involved. Why do you think we're involved? Like, we're trying to figure it out. We're not figuring it out together. I'm putting it out there.
One thing I don't appreciate is how easy you just made that look.
Just practice. Nicole, it's just practice. Like I said, I almost got drowned in Green Lake, you know, trying to figure that out once. You'll all get it. Just again, every time you get a new case, you do this again. So it'll be a lot of practice. So we're reaching the end of the time. I'm hoping this was a good experience. And like I said, there'll be more chances for experience every time you get a new case. And, you know, let us know how we can do some more coaching as we go forward. It's always great to see videotape of yourself doing these. That would be ideal. The idea here too is now we've done our introduction and we're ready to have that next conversation on what needs to change. And that next conversation about what needs to change with Danielle is going to happen on Thursday at the next session. We're going to pick up right where we left off today. Yeah, go ahead, Gretchen.
Yeah, no, so I think we're good to go for the day. I'll get this recording posted. And here's the deal. I just appreciate everyone who stayed in for small groups. I know, you know, some folks had to jump out for life and work and all of that. But beautiful job trying to make yourself vulnerable. This isn't easy work, right? And so, Nicole, I think I appreciate how you're like, oh, Matt, how do you make this look so easy? Because it's not. It looks easy on paper. You go to do it. It's a whole nother story. So thanks to everyone being vulnerable and putting themselves into groups and putting themselves out there to try. And someday we're all going to be like Matt, right? This is going to become easy. But today we're in the same boat. So with that, we'll see you on Thursday and we'll go from there. Hope you have a good rest of your Monday.